Hello everyone, this is Paul Andrews. I'm a technical specialist in Chicago for Autodesk Media and Entertainment. About a month ago, we introduced Flame Premium 2013 at the NAB show in Las Vegas. That was, like I said, mid-April that we rolled this out. We did lots of different presentations, and I thought today would spend some time going through one of the presentations in some more detail about how Flame Premium works when you start thinking about using Flame Premium for grading, for doing editorial, and for doing effects and 3D compositing, and getting into relighting. And really that's what is great about Flame Premium, is that it is a suite of products that really allows you to do all the finishing necessary to do pretty much any job that you'd bring to bear on a particular day's work or session, whether, as I said, it's grading, whether it's editorial, whether it's doing VFX work. And this is all bundled as this suite of tools. So the project that was provided to us for NAB was from a company in New York City called Dtouch. And we certainly would like to thank our Flame Premium artist there, Alex Arce, and also Elle Magazine for letting us share the story of how they put this project together. So Dtouch is a company that does a lot of digital image capturing, photo retouching. They're a leader in this particular environment. Their clients are some of the biggest in the world of high fashion photography. Elle Magazine, one of their clients, is the largest fashion publication in the world and has been in business since the mid-1940s. What you may not know about Elle Magazine is they currently have over 20 websites globally that generate over 26 million page views a month. Now, when they're thinking about how to get people to look at the newsstand version, the print copy of Elle Magazine, they really were trying to figure out a way to take all of this accumulated hits on their internet websites and drive people to the newsstand. So they worked with Dtouch to create some really beautiful and compelling videos to help launch their March print issue. And by using Flame Premium, Alex was able to bring many of the same image processing techniques that are used for print to moving pictures. Let's take a look at one of the segments that they put together. This is actually a campaign of about 4 different elements, or 4 different pieces. Let's take a look at these. So that's the first one of the segment. All of this material was shot on Red. Also Tim Richardson, director, editor, that put this together offline and then brought content to Alex to finish online using Flame Premium. That one was pretty interesting because the actress model in that one is also the singer and band member of the people who composed that particular piece. This one's pretty interesting because it uses a timeline within Flame Premium to do a number of different vertical stacking, compositing techniques using logical operations and blending modes in order to get this really interesting looking piece. Very compelling, very beautiful, very creative ways of using the different modes of blending to bring together these images. And finally, the fourth piece in the campaign is a great use of, again, using the color grading tools and compositing tools within Flame Premium to come up with something that's very organic and very fluid looking. Just a beautiful piece that was done for the magazine. So really terrific looking pieces done by Alex Arce, Tim Richardson, Dtouch, and thanks again to Elle Magazine as well as everyone I just mentioned for helping us with this material to be able to show this to you today on our webinar. So if we take a look at the sources and some of the elements that went into creating this, I think a few things that are kind of interesting is to really kind of break down some of the elements in the timeline and take a look at exactly how this was really kind of put together. If we expand out our timeline a little bit and then just maybe take a look at this position in the timeline, what we see our audio tracks here at the bottom of the timeline. We can turn on some waveforms if we want, so we can go through and we can scrub our audio and hear and see visually the representation of that audio. We've got a work picture down here at the bottom that we use as a way to make sure that things are going together properly. This is our reference image. So if we start looking at the base layer here, this is from the shoot, and it's pretty interesting because if we look closely at this, we can see on the side of our image, we can see the guys grabbing the silk fabric and kind of moving it around as if it's being blown in the wind. Just to control it a little bit better. I just think this is a really interesting technique. Very simple, you know, all practical, but very controlled in how you can move the fabric in this particular case. Then as we go up the stack, we can see in this particular layer that there's a set extension, really just stretching the image left and right through that shot in order to start building this up. Some different crops that have been created on the shot as we work up the stack. A little higher on the stack up to this level, again, just working on the set extensions and some of the blending modes. And then here, this is pretty interesting because this is the real effect of the blur and the blend and some of the smearing that's going on in this shot to really make this very fluid and very the fabric really kind of blend through all the layers of the clips below. So it's really a great way of using the timeline in a stacking method. Now you might remember also down at this particular piece, one of the things I mentioned was just the stacking of clips on this one as well, so that you can start to see how the different elements, by using a vertical stacking mechanism, allow you to start to cut holes in different positions on the timeline. So for example, on a white background, we've got an element that is being just keyed over the top of that. Then we've got another element on top of that, which really just is, here's the source element for that. It's just the girl with her blue skin, which was color graded within Flame Premium. Just looking at the source of that. And then we'll look at, real quickly, just the preview of that comp, and we can see a person's face really kind of coming through that. That's the original person's face back here. And that's being comped by using some of the tools that are soft effects built into the timeline, and just one of the blending modes, in this case, a screen of the particular clips. And if we go one layer higher, we can see that this one, again, is using a soft effect, but in this case, a multiply to put our model back over the top of that stack. So really interesting techniques in order to put this together. And I thought it was a really nice project to be able to share with you today during our webinar. So let's shrink that down, and let's think about how a lot of this material gets put together. The best piece that I thought that I would show you is this last one, and this is the one that has all of this kind of fluid effect and the crumpling of the image as it goes through. And you can see here how it resolves into the woman's face. In order to conform this piece, we're going to use a combination of EDL and the red media files that put this together. And we're going to do that by going back into our library. Here's our L workflow demo library, and if we open that up, here's the different elements that we've loaded to our desktop already. One of the pieces here is a reel that is empty sources. I don't have my sources loaded yet. And I'm going to use a quick bookmark within my library to take me right to the sources. And it opens up the different cards that I have on here. Here's some of the sources that we saw for the red fabric piece. Card 5 has the elements that we want to use for the job of the fourth spot that we need to put together. All this is red. If we double click on it, we get information about this material down here at the bottom, and it tells us it's red. We see the metadata about it. We can see debarring controls, and these debarring controls can get down to really fine parameters. If we go to the camera settings and go to some user settings that are there, we can then immediately turn on the default look, change the exposure of this. In fact, we can swipe here to the right and we can take a look at what's going on with this particular shot. You know, maybe the color temperature for this was set incorrectly. We need to go in and make it something that's more akin to what the shoot was like. So we just adjusted the color temperature of that. If we want to go in and really color correct this, using the red tools, we can do that. And by the way, we are now supporting the Red 4.3 SDK, which includes Red Color 3, Red Gamma 3. If you're using high dynamic range red, it will also support that with using the magic motion, so we can blend between different exposures. If you look at the metadata for this shot, you've got access to all sorts of different criteria that is listed in this shot to show you information about how this piece of media was composed, how it was set up on the shoot. And as I said, you can change this, or you can go right back to the camera settings and let those load in. So lots of control over this material. Let me swipe here and just select all of my clips. And we can change this, the debarring settings to something, let's say, in this case, a half premium, 12 bits, so it's got a lot of color information in these clips. If we take any of these clips and then start scrubbing through them, we can see those, we can hit play, and it just plays this red material straight away inside Flame Premium on the fly doing the debar. So lots of great control in the library for bringing in different kinds of compressed media formats. So let me go into a dual view here, and I'm going to switch my second viewer to my reel where I've got my sources that are kind of, it's an empty reel for sources, and I'm just going to take all these clips and drag and drop them into that location. So now I've got those sitting in a reel that I can now have access to for doing my conform. And this is a really slick way of using an EDL to drive the conform in this case. So if I go to my import module and then I go to load, I can see that I've got an EDL here, which is actually a 6-layer EDL. Let's go ahead and take all those, and we're going to load those against my sources reel. And this is all 2398 material. So we go ahead and say load. And then we can do a multi-assemble of all this material and say, well, layer 1 is going to go to track 1, and then I'm going to add all these other EDLs as individual layers, stacking my EDL in my timeline automatically. So when I do my conform, I end up with a clip sitting in my library that has all of the empty layers conformed. It doesn't have the media yet. We're going to do that right now just by going into some tools here where I can decide whether or not I want to consolidate the clip so it has a certain amount of handles. And we can go in here also and reformat this clip so it reflects the metadata, it reflects the bit depth of the source material that we're going to do the conform. Remember, I said it was 12 bits. So if we copy that from my source clip, it's now 1536 by 810, 12 bit, the frame rate's right. We'll take the EDL, reformat that, and then we can do an unlink and relink using the time code and tape name. Essentially, in this case, we're going to relink this timeline from our reel of clips. So hit relink, it finds the sources. We can take that clip, we can put it on our desktop. Let's take a look at the timeline, and here it is, conformed. So there's a timeline with a checkerboarded stacking mechanism here for doing the conform that was based on the EDL that was provided to us. Now, if we go and take a look at the work picture that was supplied also, just looking at this, here's our work picture on our base layer. This is just a black and white stack of clips that have been sandwiched together using Final Cut. And you can see that these are just really kind of been cut together with simple repositions to give us an idea of what the shots are supposed to look like when they start getting composed. These clips are what we just conformed. So if we go up in here, here's our checkerboarded stack of clips here. And if we go up a layer, here's the next one. If we go up a layer, here's the next one. And because they're checkerboarded, they start to obscure the clips below. So you're always looking from the top layer where this little dash is on my positioner, which we call the focus. Wherever that is located, that's what shows us through the stack of clips on our timeline. So we're now looking at this particular clip, then we're looking at this particular clip. If we move a little further over, now we're looking at this particular clip. You see how the checkerboarding mechanism works. So again, pretty cool way of using the timeline to do the conform and get it prepared for what we're about to do now, which is to take this timeline, collapse it. This is my smoke conform that I'm using right now. And then going to my library and opening up a library for luster. Drag and drop that onto the luster library so that we can use this within our grading application. To review what we've done so far, we've taken our content and conformed it in our timeline using EDLs. Now we could use Apple Final Cut Pro XMLs, either version 7. We have new support now in version 10. So that's kind of cool, as well as being able to use Avid Media Composer 6 AAFs. And this interop with Media Composer extends even to stereo timelines. Area Look file support is included, as well as support for Scarlet, Epic, Red 1, and even some of the new content that surrounds the high dynamic range images that Red can produce. Next, we're going to take our timeline into our grading application. This is where we can do real-time color grading using a number of different tools within the grading application, including new tangent element panel support. So if you like a solid control surface with rings and balls and different kind of knobs to do your color grading, that's now supported, including some new media export tools which can accelerate your ability to deliver some of the file formats from the grading application that you might be asked to do on a daily basis. Now that we've finished preparing our timeline, we can then move into grading. And here we are at the startup screen for the grading interface. We have the same project that we've been working on, which is the Dtouch L magazine workflow. If I go to my editing browse, we see the different machines that are out in our network. And I can navigate to my local machine, Bugatti, into the file system where each of the projects on this particular machine are located. I also have a bookmark that I can use that will take me straight to the smoke conform that we just finished in the editorial application. A couple of things I want to call your attention to here, which are pretty neat. One of them is a pretty simple thing. Over here on the right side, just the ability to create new folders in the editing or VFX application from the grading interface. That can be pretty useful as you're starting to make organization where different files are going to go, or maybe you want to get rid of some things. You can make new folders, delete old folders. Again, just kind of some nuts and bolts stuff. The most important one, though, is this button here, source grading. We're going to leave that on. When we leave that on, our timeline that we take and we drag and drop to the storyboard area is now going to point not to anything that was rendered in our timeline when we were editing with it, or maybe VFX work that had renders in it. It's actually going to point back to the original, in this case, red material. And that's really important because I want to have access to that content in its best bit depth and have most control over it as we start to grade our content. As we start looking at the settings, it is using the camera settings. It's debayering it at a quarter debayer. Well, maybe that's not a great setting for doing our debayering. You can say our size is fairly small here. No problem. We actually have two ways to look at this in our viewport. I'm going to switch this to a full mode for the main viewport, but I could also switch this to a proxy mode and set the proxy viewport to, let's say, half premium. So in one case, I could be looking at 4K or 5K, and in the proxy mode, I could be looking at 2K or something maybe just a little bit higher in that case. So now as we go through, and I'm going to put this in a loop mode and start playing this down, we now have really good performance. But if at any time I want to check quality and look at the full debayer, we could stop that, switch to full mode, and now I can see the same material in that full debayer going through that particular shot. The cool thing is that I can do all my work at the lower resolution, getting great performance, and then it's immediately applied to the high-res material simultaneously. I want to take all of this setting that I just did and copy it to the other shots, because if we go to the other shots, you can see this still says quarter, quarter, so does this one. What we'll do is highlight this shot, go to my selector, scroll down into the transcode settings, look at the red transcode settings. So there's a ton of them here, but the ones I'm really concerned with right now are just the debayering settings. With that selected, then I can select all my clips, and they get this little cyan outline, and then I can say copy, and only these debayering settings have now been copied to all those clips. And if we go through them, you can see they now respect that same setting. I can clear my selection at this point. We can go and start to manipulate anything about these clips that you might want to do further. Maybe it's the different color settings. There's different color spaces that you can use in here. As I mentioned before, we're now supporting the 4.3 SDK, so you could use red color 3 on this if you want. You could use red gamma 3. There's a number of different kinds of controls here that you can use for working with the settings in debayering. Anytime you make a change here, let's say you want to change the exposure, the camera settings go off and it starts to respect the different changes that you're doing to your clip. If you want to go back, just switch back to camera, and then the camera settings are now respected again. Anyway, that's really handy and very, very flexible as you start getting into doing a lot of the color grading work. Color grading is pretty dependent on look development. So if we take a look at our shot here, there's a number of different things we can do. Straight away in the grading pipeline, what we can do is go to the main grading tools where we've got lift, gamma, gain for our color balance, and we can just start moving that around, using the gammas in this particular case to give it a particular wash over that image. We can quickly reset that. We've got controls for our lifts and our gammas and our gains, our saturations if we want to really push that one way or another. And oh, by the way, we can start playing this and make those corrections on the fly. So if we wanted to maybe desaturate this a little bit, something like that, bring the black levels down, we want to bring some gammas up, something like that. We want to give it more of a bluish look, something like that. And then we want to go to one of our secondary layers, and in a secondary we have the opportunity to qualify this shot either by using a shape like we're doing here, make a soft edge on that, and we're really just making something that looks like this, essentially a matte. Go to the outside controls of that shape, and you've got inside and outside grading controls. So on the outside, I want to take that grade and move it to something that's a little bit warmer, something like that. Maybe head more toward the complement color, or maybe just bring the gammas down, something like this, to create more of a vignette. On the inside of the shot, I want to bring up my gammas to offset a little bit of the black area in her dress, something along those lines. So Again, getting into look development here is pretty straightforward, and you can go in and do a number of different things to the shots to make it look really cool. So let's go ahead and start a little bit different attack on doing look development, something using the effects palette. And the effects palette, this is all built in to the grading application, where you've got different kinds of defocuses and noise plugins and stuff like that. Print bleach is one that's kind of a favorite. You can go in, let's just go ahead and again play this down. And as we start mixing in some of the look, and then hit some brightness on that to kind of compensate and give it a little bit of a blur, you can see this really interesting print bleach look that we've now applied to that shot. And you can go in and you can continue grading this on the fly as well. So that's debayering, doing a plugin, doing a little bit of a creative look development on this as it's all playing down in real time. Again, using the grading application to take advantage of a lot of the real-time performance within Flame Premium. Another thing that we could do, let's reset that, is we could use the effects palette from a third-party vendor. Workflowers is a company that makes plugins for the grading application. So if you wanted to do something that was like an emboss, there's actually, could stack up 6 different kinds of plugins in here at once if you want. Here's one that's kind of wacky. It's just a kaleidoscope effect, where you could go in and you could start making some different creative decisions about how you want to manipulate the material, start building some interesting offsets. Again, kind of using plugins as a special effects tool within the application. And those are, like I said, a third-party plugin that you could use. Let's go ahead and turn that off. Within the application, there's also something that's fairly new. Actually, it is brand new in the 2013 application, and that's using a set of presets. And these presets have a number of different kinds of looks that you can apply. Some of them are filters. Here's a whole selection of different kinds of color filters that you can use. I want to say there's about over 150 of these. I think it's even quite a bit more than that. But if you just double tap on that, that particular filter is applied. If you tap on this one, that filter is applied. Different kinds of image tools that you could use. Sharpen tool, if you wanted to do something like that. If you wanted to go and use a preset vignette, you could do something like that. So there's a number of them in here, so double tap on that. You can see kind of a rectangular vignette for that particular shot. Some of my favorites are under the film mode. I like Kodachrome. I think it makes a really interesting period look. If you scroll down, there's a number of other ones. There's an Ektachrome. Let's apply that. These are all just presets built in. One of them at the end, there's one called Black and White Hicon. One's a little stronger treatment than the other. If we double click on that, this gets us really close to where we want to go with this particular shot. So let's use that as a starting point. And a lot of times what these looks are all about is really about where to start with your shot. So this is one that we'll do is we'll use that and add to it using our secondaries. So if we do something like this, we'll just make a simple shape around her. And that shape is just an ellipse. And within that shape, we're going to make it a bit softer. We'll do some outside grading on this shot. Take the gain up, really to blow out the whites on that. And we're not that concerned about her hands at this point. We can make some gamma adjustments to pull some of that back. Go to the inside controls. Let's take the gain up there just a little bit, something like that. Bring our gammas back to get some control over the detail in her dress. And essentially that's where we're going with this shot. It's really blown out, really contrasty to get the effect that we're trying to achieve. Now this same look, we'd like to apply it to the other shots really quickly, easy to do. Hold a hotkey down, drag and drop, and now that's been applied to the next shot. And maybe the shape works on this shot, maybe it doesn't. Maybe you need to move it just a little bit to expose different portions of her hair. Maybe you need to open it up just a little bit. So again, really flexible ways of making this work. Now, we've taken a little bit of time and done our timeline with the different shapes, with the contrast that we're trying to achieve to get all this done. The other thing that's new in here as we think about rendering this is exporting content either as QuickTime or MXF files. And if we think about doing maybe QuickTimes, maybe you've got an art director or maybe a producer that's sitting back at their office and they want to see where you've taken this. You could do an iPad deliverable, and these are just templates. They're set up in all sorts of different formats. And you can customize this as you like. This is just a preset for the iPad. Load that, and it loads us that into this particular area where we can build up a batch list of different things that we want to export. So it could be one, it could be, in this case, two, it could be five, whatever, and it does this in the background by submitting this over here by hitting the export button or export all versions. And it will do this in the background. So you can continue working on other versions, rendering this content out to the VFX or the editing software as we're going to do now. So if we hit render local, we can then move on to rendering this content back for our VFX session, which is our source graded material with heads and tails and in a multi-layer mechanism. Now I've already rendered this out for us, and if we touch this button for P, which is what we've printed, we can scroll through and confirm what we've rendered back into the library as our finished elements. So at this point we're done doing our grading, and we're ready to go back and do the final touches for the really cool kind of fluid effects that put this spot together. To review, we've used Flame Premium to conform, grade, and now finishing the project using the VFX tools. Here we are back on the desktop of the timeline application. And if we go to the Luster library, which is the library that's currently active, and open it up, in here we find the original timeline that we saved and passed over to grading. In addition, we see the reel of contents, grade 1, which is what we loaded at the end and then processed. Each of the individual clips for that grade rendered out in its final resolution, and then one final extra clip. This is the clip that is the final assembled piece that we can then take, load, and examine the way that this is put together. And you can see how these clips now all stack together in the very same way that we saw them represented over in grading, and where we started uncorrected at the very beginning of our project. The other thing I would call your attention to is, remember we talked about doing this as a source grade? Well, if we pick this particular clip, you'll notice over on the very left-hand side, if you're familiar with the timeline and soft effects, there is a time warp on that particular clip that is moving at minus 100%. Well, that is the soft effect that was still embedded, that metadata embedded in that clip as we pulled it across into grading. Some of the other clips have similar effects. That one's, again, minus 100. This one is a speed up. This one is running at about 30%. So they're all being respected as it comes through the pipeline as we moved it from conforming back to grading and now back into doing the work of the timeline. Now, where we're going to take this is to start really doing this compositing using the stacking mechanism that we have in here, and using what we have inside the timeline as something called batch effects. With all these selected, what we can do is take this timeline and promote it into batch effects. So now what we see here is inside the compositing pipeline a way to represent this very timeline in a procedural path where we can start adding different kinds of things like 3D blurs, like different tools like damage, deform. These are all nodes, and there's a lot of them here that you can use. Glow nodes, different kinds of keyers, different kinds of color correctors if you want to take this further. You can break this down into little tabs that have sorted the different kinds of tools in here so that it's easier to get at a particular node that you might want to work with, maybe a gradient node. These are all different tools that we can bring to bear on this particular project. Okay, let's select our timeline here. And if we double click on that, go back to the timeline, we can split this out into action layers. And this is going to be pretty important. Action is our 3D compositing environment. As I scrub through my timeline, you can see the individual clips popping on and off in the order as they were used in the timeline area. If we go into action and we start taking a look at what's built in there, these are the different layers that we've got in our shot for compositing. I'm going to move this into a 2-up view so what we can see on the right window is our result view. On the left window we can see each of the different clips in the composite, and you can see on the right window how these are starting to layer together. So this is pretty interesting. If we take the media layers in here and we highlight the whole stack, we're going to turn off the matte elements for this. So now what we're doing is we're totally compositing and obscuring these with full layers of video in our stacking mechanism. And what we're going to do with this is we're going to start using some of the blending tools in here to get our work done. So if we scrub down just a little bit to where this particular shot pops on, this is our second element here, image 2. We can then use some of these blending tools. Whether you want to use Flame or Photoshop tools. We use Flame tools, let's do a multiply. So if we do something like that, or if we do a screen, or if we do an add, these are all different ways of bringing the shot together. And then we can use the axis to start to slide this aside, take the axis on this shot and slide it aside. Then we can go back to image 1 and we can maybe scale it up, move it over, something like this, position it down, really make it a lot larger in the shot. Really just figuring out how we want these different layers and elements to start to pull together. As we scroll down a little bit further, we've got another shot that pops on. But essentially, you can start to see how the compositing is starting to work on this particular piece. If we go back to our batch view, what we'll do is we're going to slice this particular portion of the batch tree, and we'll throw that away. Because in my batch tree, I've got a starting point here that Alex used when he was doing the composite. So if we look at our action tree now, this is the same set of pieces that made this up. If we go into action and we start scrubbing through this, you can see that there's that bit of a blow up on the first shot, and the second shot starts to pull through. But there's some other interesting things that are happening here that are certainly worth mentioning. And if we take a look at the action tree of how this is working inside batch, the surfaces, for example here, I'll shrink this down a little bit, as we scrub through, you can see that there is a bit of a cutout of the woman's face. You can see it here on the right screen as well. And what those are garbage masks that are floating in to bring that shot in, something like that, and marry her face together in kind of a split, as well as different images that are burning through the shot. Use again the blending modes that make this all possible. So this is where, you know, Alex really took this as a way to start to put this together and then feed this into another part of the pipeline that's going to do our effects. That part of the pipeline, let's investigate this a little bit more. So as we scrub this and take a look at our action node, if we sweep down here to the left side, there is a deform node that he ran this through. So the output of action is going into deform. And if we now take a look at our result, this is what it looks like. Let's look at it in our 2-up view. So now we've got our action node here that feeds into the deform node here, and this is starting to give us this what's called a crumple. But I think with the kind of images that we've created, it really looks like ink and very fluid. So as we start to scrub through this, now we're getting that look that made the whole piece so interesting as this starts to drag through and different pieces start to pull together, and we start to build the reveals of all the different components in order to make this look really, really cool. Let's go back to our pipeline here, And I'm going to take this piece, let's just shrink this back just a bit, and down in the my settings down here, I've got this piece as a full result. So this is what Alex did. We can take this segment, we can throw that away, and really start to investigate how this went together. So again, taking a look at the pipeline, starting over here on the left side, this is really exactly where we started, starting with our individual clips here. So we scrub through those, you see those pop on as we intersect those different elements. If we go into the action portion of this, this is where they start to pop in. That action node, if we take a look at that, feeds into a deform node, which feeds into some color frame nodes, which feeds into another action composite down here. And so we're using multiple actions inside of batch. That's what's really great about batch, is that you can take the result of one composite and feed it into another. If we take a look at the results of this, so here's where we just were, there's our viewport. Here's the action node. Over here on the right side, let's zoom that up just a little bit and start to scrub through that. So now we see the crumple, we see the woman's face start to resolve through. That's just really, really beautiful, I think. And then the result of that, if we take a look at our pipeline here, ends up going and resolving itself back into our timeline. So all this tree that we've built on the left side is to give us the result that we see on the right side, and by putting this back into a node that feeds it into our timeline as a result of the compositing that we just finished. Now, this needs to be processed, but in order to just kind of move things along a little bit, let's just revisit the piece as we saw it rendered in its final form. It's really a beautiful piece. So thanks to Alex Arce at Dtouch in New York City, Elle Magazine for sharing this project with us. And I think that the message I'd like to leave you with today, after seeing this beautiful work, is the ability of Flame Premium to act in a very interactive and fluid manner, which allows you to explore ideas that can inspire you to discover even better ways to deliver your creative vision. That's it. Flame Premium 2013 in a round-trip workflow. This is Paul Andrews from Chicago for Autodesk Media Entertainment, saying thank you for joining us today for our webinar.